It is my pleasure now to welcome on the coach for the Masaka Cycling Club, Sam Mutton. Sam, how are you today, mate?
Yeah, doing really well. Thanks, Chris. How you doing?
I'm doing absolutely sensational, mate. I'm looking forward to getting stuck into this chat. You've come with very high praise from a great man himself. So no pressure at all. And I'm sure it'll be a great chat. Before we get into your story and cycling and sort of how you find yourself in Uganda, first, we'll get into a little bit about you and your background. So you're from a beautiful place in the UK called Sheringham. Talk about growing up
Yeah,
there and what Sam was like as a kid.
yeah, absolutely. So Sheringham is like as about as remote as it comes for the UK. It's on the east coast of the country. Biggest city near us is Norwich. And yeah, I grew up there basically all my life from kind of the ages of 1.5 through to 18 before eventually coming out to Uganda on a gap year. I think Sheringham, right on the coast. So I was into all my kind of water sports, things like that. But that was where I really got like a love for the outdoor sort of sports. I grew up really football was my main sport, or soccer. For the international listeners, was my main kind of game for many, many years. But I just realized I was never good enough to get anywhere near pro and ended up getting into cycling a little bit here and there, and just more because my parents got sick of driving us around, and me being a competitive kind of guy, it always just grew into like, right, well, how fast can I get from one town to the next town, and then things like Strava came out, and me being a numbers nerd, just kind of my love for pushing my body as hard as it could go, just grew and grew really. And so yeah, I grew up basically on a kind of any sport I could play sort of diet, out 6 nights playing sport and try and maybe rest one day a week sort of thing. And yeah, great place to live. Quite a sheltered place. You come from somewhere like that to Kampala is quite a slap in the face. It's a hell of a lot of difference. It's a little town of 7,000, and here you have yeah, absolute sensory overload. I describe it, Uganda, but yeah, wouldn't change it for the world, mate. Really beautiful part of the world to grow up in, and it's great going back to see the folks. Every now and then there too.
There's a very common trait amongst Australians is for them to talk about the fact that they would have played professional cricket or they would have played at professional Aussie rules if it wasn't for this or wasn't for that. Now, when you say you were really good at football, is that you being a little bit of an Australian there and sort of just going like, oh yeah, I probably would have played for in the Premier League, but just a couple of injuries here and there, cost me?
I'd like to blame on injuries, but realistically, I just wasn't good enough, mate. I think the problem was I was distracted by too many sports. If I'd have just pursued one, maybe it would be a different story now. But I was trying to play anything and everything I could get my hands on. So, I got to captain my uni and things like that, bro. So there, I got some good moments in there, but I was never going to make it to like anything near making a living off. It was always just a deep passion for me, and that's about it, really. I'll blame the injuries, but I know deep down it definitely wasn't that.
Yeah, no, that's good. I think it's good to be able to be honest with you in situations like that. Me, on the other hand, I was cost by injuries, and unfortunately, it cost me, probably a life of luxury. But that's completely fine. Let's talk about how you got into cycling. I know you sort of touched on there. It was moving in out of sports, and then you sort of just got into that, and you're super competitive. But talk about early days getting into cycling and maybe something specific that sort of really sticks out when you sort of think back to it now.
Sure, sure. Yeah. So as I say, kind of it was a necessity growing up, and then I got married in 2014 in my final year of university. So I was living in a beautiful town called Bournemouth on the south coast of the UK. It's kind of like the only UK kind of surfing city, really. Absolutely stunning area. But my uni was like 16 k's away, and being a poor student and my wife only just straight out of university, we didn't have a lot of money. So basically I had to cycle every day kind of through all conditions, 16k to uni, 16k back, so I was clocking 32k a day, which for a lot of people is nothing, but for me it felt like quite a lot at the time. And I was on this old super heavy kind of hybrid 14 kg piece of crap, really. And I think my wife basically felt sorry for me. It was an absolute entry level road bike halfway through the year for my birthday, and all of a sudden it was like, right, how quick can I get to uni, back from uni, things like that. And then yeah, just grew from that, I guess, really. After, I think, when I graduated, me and a friend of mine, we did a bit of bike packing around the southwest of the UK, bike packing around the southwest of the UK, kind of just like a proper basic 80K a day for 5 days, kind of just touring around some of the more beautiful scenic areas. And I just absolutely loved it. I loved the freedom it brought. I loved the sense of like, I'm on my own. If there's a problem, I've got to sort this sort of thing, phones off, away from social media, away from the just general hustle of life. And I think that's where that's where the obsession, I would say, started to come from. It was always just more of an ends to means, and then actually doing a longer ride, 80, 100K, I was like, yeah, I'm enjoying this. Right, how fast can I kind of do a 80K time trial? And the obsession with numbers, things like Strava, heart rate, it all just grew from there. Then started probably about 2016, 2017. Got onto Zwift, things like that, and I was not one of the first people on Zwift, but I was definitely on Zwift before it was really super sexy and fashionable like it is nowadays. And just absolutely, I was obsessed with it, trying to get my ranking up, trying to get the watts per kilo up. And it just became like, right, my week would be based around when the racing was on and things like that. I was absolutely so sad now looking back on it and talking about it out loud. But I just absolutely loved it. It was like, right, Tuesday night, I got a KISS Racing League, And I mean, I was only knocking on the door of ACAT racing when I was super fit then. And, so it's nothing special by any stretch again, but I just loved it. And then my younger brother, who's like one of my best mates and actually is out here now with me on his gap year, he ended up getting machine as well on. And so we were basically then the two competitive lads from the family were just racing each other like 5 nights a week on Zwift and just pushing each other to as far as we could go, really. And then, yeah, me and Matt, my younger brother, we were like, let's book a cycling holiday. We need to kind of test ourselves on some big, UK is pretty flat. So we booked a trip to the Alps and did Alpe d'Huez and some of the famous Tour de France climbs. Must be about 3 years ago now, maybe 4. And absolutely, again, just absolutely loved it. Kind of the thrill of, not the thrill of climbing, it hurts like hell, but the descending at least, absolutely loved that, and just fell more and more in love with it as a sport. And yeah, I guess that's my journey into cycling. Really, I think the university commuting where it suddenly shifted from like, oh, this is an absolute nutache, to kind of being, I'm absolutely loving this. Kind of how fast can I get into uni on this tin can hybrid, and seeing if I could go sub 30 minutes for 16K and things like that. And that just obsession with numbers, I think it was a perfect kind of marriage almost, if that makes sense. And it's just grown and grown from there to where we are in Uganda today.
Let's talk about sadness and numbers, because the way that we sort of come to do this today is Ross Burridge, who was on the show a few weeks ago. And I was pretty open with the fact that I'm not the world's fastest and best cycler and most keen cycler. And I'd been sending him a couple of my Strava rides, and he said, get your kilometers up to sort of this and to that. And then I've absolutely flogged myself over 10Ks one day, and I can't remember what my kilometers were. It was in the low 20s. And he said, Sam, our coach, can ride 40 kilometers an hour for an hour nonstop. And that made me so depressed. I almost traded in my bike. So you almost the reason why my bike journey ended very quickly into it.
I think Ross has overinflated that a little bit. That would be very fast for me. I think my best 80K TT, I did a 2 hours, like 2 hours 28, I think, something like that, for 80 kilometers. That's just on a road bike, so it's not on a proper time trial bike. So there's probably low to mid 30s, and then 10 mile time trials, probably more my forte, kind of coming in at like 26 minutes, 25 minutes. But again, that's just on a generic road bike. I haven't got the fancy setups that a lot of these guys have, and you can shave off kind of 10, 15%. So maybe if everything went right, I could get into the 40Ks, but not for an hour. I don't know. Ross is getting a bit carried away with himself there. I know these ultra endurance riders like to inflate their numbers where possible, but definitely if I broke 40K for an hour, I would have told you by now.
Yeah. So, I mean, long story short is you're still smoking me regardless of what weapon you choose, but that's completely fine. Let's get into Uganda. How do you find yourself there? I know you sort of mentioned you came over during your gap year, but what was it about Uganda that sort of attracted you to ultimately make the decision to go over?
Yeah, it's quite a long story. So it started in 2010 was when I did my gap year, and basically, like, I didn't particularly enjoy academics and school that much, and uni. I ended up going to uni, but for me, that wasn't an option when I was 18. I was like, I'd got the grades to go, but I just didn't want to go. I was like, I'm done with learning stuff basically in a classroom setting. It just doesn't sit well with me. I don't work well in those scenarios, I guess. And I basically wanted to ride around Europe with one of my best mates in Sheringham, and we were going to just pick our bags and go. And I think my parents were kind of like, he's never going to come back, he's going to be dead, sort of thing. And so they basically said, if you do something that's voluntary and meaningful, we'll kind of we'll pay for a third of it, which is about £1,000 at the time. And so that kind of swung it. And so I was like, crap, I can't go riding because I can't afford to do it. My mum and dad aren't going to help me out and help me anymore. And so my family just happened to sponsor a girl in an orphanage in Uganda. And it was literally just pick a country on a map, Google it, and just found interesting projects out with this charity. Signed up to come out here for 5 months. And basically the remit then was to basically help in a school. And also this school was attached to an orphanage, a different orphanage to the one where we sponsored a girl, but an orphanage nonetheless. And it was an amazing, I don't know if you ever have those moments in life where you just like, you look back on it and just, that was a truly life-changing moment. And I don't mean to sound dramatic by that, but it genuinely was. I come from kind of little country bumpkin in Sheringham in Norfolk in the UK to Uganda, first time I traveled without my family. And it was just a proper slap in the face, but in all the right ways. It opened my eyes to real poverty, and we did ended up, the actual charity we were with turned out to be a bit, I don't want to say corrupt, but just they advertised one thing and we got here and it was something very different. So me and one of the girls on the gap year team were like, well, we spent, quite a lot of our savings or time and energy over the last year getting money together to come out here. Let's go and kind of do what we wanted. And kind of that ended up taking us into some of the slum communities in Uganda. So the lady that I did that with, she was from the UK. She's now my wife, Chloe. But we were literally placed on the same gap year team, hit it off, and well, the rest is history now. But I ended up just basically playing football in a slum community. I literally walked into a slum with a football, and within like 3 weeks we had a football league going with about 150 boys playing on a Thursday and Friday. And I put in a bit of money to just spice it up, and we had 10 teams kind of playing a round robin sort of competition. And I just loved it. I was like, this is what I want to be doing in my life. I want to be doing sport with guys that perhaps literally can't even afford a football. I don't want to be seen as like a white savior or anything like that. I just want to get in there and get my hands dirty and have some fun. And just really hit it off, built some beautiful connections with these guys. So yeah, that was 2010, 2011. I then did go to uni and did youth work, basically studied youth work to kind of marry up with the passions of sport and doing that abroad. And then ended up doing youth work as a profession in a few churches in the UK for about 3 years before me and my wife were like, how do we, we both love Uganda, both wanted to come back out here. How the heck do we make it work coming out here? And just managed to work our way into a position where financially we could make it work. We've got a few people like basically churches and organizations, charities, things like that in the UK that pay our salary out here and make life work for us in that end. And we moved out here 2019. We kind of took that punt to come out here. And in truth, my aim wasn't really to do like coaching at that time. I had planned to do like some cycle tours. Like Uganda is one of the most beautiful countries you could ever come to, and it's developing really well in terms of its like infrastructure, road infrastructure. And I wanted to set up some road cycling tours, and we were just in a place where we were about to launch it. I'd done all the kind of preliminary work and checked out all the routes, and then COVID hit, and it was like, oh, that's a terrible time to be in tourism because basically every country shut its airports. That kind of then ended up steering me into a bit of coaching. We had one turbo trainer in my living room, basically, and I put a few Ugandans on it on Zwift as a bit of fun. And I was just shocked by their, like, these are guys that have never really ridden bikes before. They don't really change gears. They don't really understand, how to ride a bike. They just pedal as hard as they can. And so that's basically what I got them to do. I'd say, just get on the bike, 20-minute, how fast can you go and how far can you go on Zwift? And they were hitting, for guys that really not done any exercise like this, very physically fit guys, so very hardware life for a lot of people out here, very physically demanding. They'll all be six packed and ripped, and it's kind of stuff we can only really dream of, looking like 60 kg kind of super great kind of climbing physiques. Put them on this thingy, and they were coming out, like, if you look at their watts per kilo, like not much worse than me, who has been riding for a couple of years, for a few years on Zwift. And I was like, what the hell's that about? What a great baseline that is to be working from, if that's where we're starting from. And the thing I would tell people in the UK is, like, coaching Ugandans in many ways is just so easy, because they are naturally very fit. They all love their football out here. Football is the sport. Cycling is very much a minor sport that I'm sure we'll talk about later in the podcast. But I was just like, well, the weight is fine. They're all low 60 kilos. They weigh next to nothing. I'm at an 80 kg bus. I can only really do flats and sprints. Whereas these guys, as soon as the terrain goes uphill, they just absolutely fly. And it's like the speed we would do on the flat, they will do climbing, 20, or you said low 20 kilometers an hour earlier. These guys do 22, 23 kph on 10K climbs. It's absolutely ridiculous. And you just look at them and think, flip, if we get this right, are we tapping into an absolute gold mine of talent that just hasn't really been kind of considered by the world, I guess. And so, that's my kind of journey from 2010, very first time literally kind of picking a country on a map, to present day, where we now got this, super cool kind of coaching setup, and working with the Masaka project, and training some of the top riders in the country who are, really, really good athletes. You think if we were in a different country, in a different setup with a different infrastructure, they would be in development teams and racing internationally, almost certainly. And I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that they really are super talented. Just unfortunately, we're in a country where that isn't there for them. That isn't the opportunity. So we have to basically do it ourselves, which is what it is, really. We can't sit and moan about it too much. We just got to get our heads down and get on with it, and coach these guys and give them the best opportunities we can, which is what Ross is doing so well with. And I was so keen to kind of come on board with when we spoke about a year ago.
There's a lot to unpack in that very quick 9-year story. But I think the most amazing thing is that you were placed with, you spoke about life-changing moments, and you didn't want to, be dramatic or over-exaggerate, but you literally were placed with someone who is now your wife and mother to your daughter. Like, talk about that. Like, do you, like, even just talking about it, does that not just sort of just go to you like, holy shit, how lucky are you? And like, what are the chances?
Yeah, I mean, the chances are 1,000,000 to 1, aren't they? I literally was inches away from not coming to Uganda on a gap year, and then I don't know what life would have looked like. I had a bike in the basket basically on Wiggle I was going to buy, and then it was my parents that were like, crap, we need to stop him. So I got a lot to be grateful from them, so they kind of, it's their fault as much as anything. They were the ones that scrambled it together. And no, I completely agree, mate. Like, and also, if our gap year wasn't as disorganized as perhaps it should have been, perhaps me and Chloe wouldn't have hit it off in the same way. We were the two that were very much like, well, this kind of sucks. We're going to be helping in a school, but the school is, is only teaching a few days a week, whereas we were told we'd be doing 5 or 6 days a week. And we really wanted to just get involved, and I don't want to be cliche and say make a difference, because I just hate those sort of phrases, but we just wanted to be as useful as possible. And it really felt like it was very pointless. Okay, I was 18 and naive at the time, but we then researched other organizations that were doing stuff in Kampala, led us to working in these slum communities. And I think that was the moment that really we were like, wow, our interests, our life-giving things are so similar, those kind of deep core values that everyone seems to have, and ours was both about being involved and working with people that don't have necessarily, they have a lot, but financially don't have a lot, and so that was really our joy, bringing things. So Chloe really did a lot of work with women, young mums that got pregnant and dropped out of school, and just not necessarily making a difference in their life, but just being their friend. just culturally, if you're pregnant at a young age out here, you're quite disregarded by society. Often you'll end up living with your mum or your grandma, and that'll be it. The man will not all the time, but speaking in a lot of assumptions, the man will just disappear, and it's very male dominated society out here. You know, the women's rights are they're not really there, mate, to be quite honest with you. And so Chloe was just like, well, I just want to love these women where they're at. You know, I want to sit in their homes, I want to drink tea with them, and I want to just talk to them and share my life with them. And that's what she just loves to do, you know, and just sits with them and talks to them and befriends them basically. And, you know, Chloe's been amazing, learned some of the local language so she can kind of communicate a little bit in Luganda, our local language out here. And yeah, it's a really powerful kind of project that she does as well. And you just think, yeah, flip, how lucky am I to be firstly with someone like that, but also for, you know, you look at 2010 and, you know, as I say, it was minutes away from not kind of going on that trip. You know, it was a, you know, nice £1,000 bike that me and my mate were going to buy each and set off around Europe for 6 months. And yeah, I'm very glad I didn't in the end. I mean, I'd still like to do it, but maybe when I'm a bit older and the little kids are out the way.
Yeah, no, it's amazing how sometimes things happen and how they line up. And we are a massive love first podcast here, so that's absolutely an incredible story. And yeah, we pardon the pun, we'd love to hear about that sort of stuff. You touched on before about the talents and sort of just how naturally gifted some of these young kids are. Talk about coaching them and sort of how it's, say, different to how you would coach, say, someone in the UK or someone from Australia or someone from a place that, you know, has all of the resources, all of the equipment and every opportunity possible available to them.
Yeah, sure. I mean, my background isn't coaching, so it was very much, as I say, you know, I went out here to do cycle tourism, you know, and that fell away, and then I landed into the coaching, and that developed with the connection with Masaka last year. So I've been, I would say, making it up as I go, but definitely I've had to do a lot of learning myself, you know, and through the Armani project, one of the really great connections is with Wahoo, the super huge sports company that I'm sure nearly every follower knows of. We get to have like every 6 weeks, we get a Skype, a video call with like Neil Henderson, one of the top sports coaches in the world, basically. And so we use this software Training Peaks, and we record all their data through Zwift and then upload it to that. And he has a look at it as well. And we're always chatting, and he's been super helpful in kind of my personal journey and development and understanding of training. But yeah, the differences really are like a lot of the lads, you know, so Kato and Was were the two big dogs that we're training, you know, the super fast lads that went to the migration gravel race and came 9th and 10th there. You know, both of them speak fractured English, I think would be the best way to describe it. And both finished primary school. They never went to secondary school. You know, we've got a private school system here, which you have to pay for schooling, and their parents couldn't afford to send them to secondary school. So they finished where their parents could afford to send them. And they're twins as well. So obviously parents got paid double effectively to get their kids through schooling. And, you know, Masaka, as I know Ross said in the previous podcast, one of the poorest places, not only in Uganda, but in the world, you know, really deprived area. So I've then got these boys, and we're putting them on indoor machines, and quite honestly, you know, they don't know what they're looking at really. They understand that if I pedal faster, the man or the bar speeds up, slows down. But in terms of understanding that drafting is working, that the incline is there, and basic physics, you know, watts per kilo. So we actually had to spend quite a lot of time doing like basics physics lessons, you know, and I've got a whiteboard, and we do a lot of illustrations is the best way for us to kind of communicate it. Because obviously we're working kind of across two different languages. I'm trying my best in Luganda, and they're doing their best in English. And between us, we just about hash it together. But I think the first time I did the coaching with them, we did about 2 hours of physics lessons. And basically I drew like a hill and just said, right, if this rider is this heavy and rides at this power, will they beat this rider who is lighter and rides at this power? And we're just doing all these kind of scenarios and trying to get them to understand that it's not just power that's important, but it's power and weight, you know, are the two metrics that Zwift uses primarily to determine how quick you're going to be. And so we did a lot of just conversations around that. And now they really get it and are punching, you know, super numbers, which, you know, if I was coaching someone in the UK, I would just literally say, right, ride as hard as you can, weigh yourself, do these formulas, and they'd be able to understand. They'd just pick it up a lot quicker, you know, and that's primarily just exposure, you know, and schooling and things, you know, because I wouldn't ever be training someone in the in the UK that probably hasn't at least finished secondary school or high school or something like that. Whereas these guys, you know, you're effectively teaching someone who's got the only finished the education of like an 11 or 12-year-old. You know, WAS were both of them can't really read that well, and so you know, that is why all the visual stuff and Zwift with its numbers is just so helpful, because they're now really starting to hone their racecraft. They've done probably 40 to 50 races each now, so they really start to understand, right, if I'm in this part of the group at this moment in the race, that will probably look like this and like that. And so me and Matt, we stand over them as they race, but we're less and less having to talk tactics through with them, and much more just let them kind of do their thing. They're learning when to attack, when to sit back, when to let others go, you know, how to time their sprint finishes. So they've picked it up, you know, particularly considering the education background, and that's something I always come back to. And I have to remind myself of that too, you know, where they've finished their schooling. Like, they have picked it up incredibly fast, you know, 40 races done. And they are basically, I can leave them to Zwift themselves. You know, they can sign in on their own accounts. They know what they're doing. They get everything paired up, heart rate machines, They can log into their races and off they go, you know. So that was always the dream, was to get them to a point where if I had to pull out, these guys still know what they're doing. And yeah, we're finally getting to that place now where actually I feel quite confident that I could say, right, you know, I've got to go back to the UK for a couple of months. These are the racing leagues I want you to follow, do it. And I know that they would do probably 90% of those with no problems. You know, we've always got other issues here with power cuts and internet dropping out, and every excuse under the sun, we've got it. Basically, anything that can go wrong generally does for us, which is, you know, can be a real frustration. But the boys' mentality is just absolutely phenomenal. You know, they want to ride, and they want to ride hard. And Ross has come up with a fantastic new kind of tiered scholarship scheme, which basically incorporates their race results and their power numbers through Zwift. And the better they do, the more they can earn. And you know, the top tier now, they can earn 400,000 shillings, which in English money is just under 100 quid. I don't know quite what that works out in Aussie dollars, but you know, for them, I was chatting to Kato and said, you know, in a good month working, you know, not cycling, but just working in your mechanic shop, how much could you earn? And he was like, Sam, a good month, if I worked 6 days a week, I could earn about 150,000 shillings. That'd be a really successful month, which is like 30, 40 pounds, you know, absolutely, you know, that's a pound a day effectively for a month, you know, and so Ross has managed to get, with the support of Masaka, a scheme in place where if they get their heads down, they could earn nearly 3 times that amount through the power of Zwift, which just, that gets me so excited. You know, I'm like, well, I want to see these boys do as well as possible so that they can earn as much as possible there for their family, and then they can pay for their kids to go to school, that they don't just have to eat like rice and beans, but they can actually enjoy, you know, fruit, veg, meat, you know, have a wholesome diet and things like that. And so that really keeps me motivated, you know. And just last week, Kato finally spilled into the top tier, you know, so in November, he'll get his payment for 400,000, which is probably, no exaggeration, again, probably the most he'll ever so far to date have received in terms of a lump sum of money through cycling, which is just incredible that the cycling community and the power of Zwift has led us to a point where literally these guys' income can be through doing well on Zwift racing.
It is honestly one of the most amazing things, I think, about, you know, Ross's story and sort of what you're getting into, as well as the opportunities that this platform has created for these kids. And, you know, in a place that literally has had no type of opportunity before, it is so, honestly so amazing to see. And I'm not going to pretend like I'm an avid cyclist myself, but what sort of struck me about Ross, and you're striking the exact same chords with me, is just how passionate you are about helping these kids, and nothing is self-serving. And I absolutely love that, because, you know, if you don't see a smile, don't get a smile on your face from seeing, you know, these kids, and they are, for the most part, they are, you know, in their early teens and like early 20s, they are still very young. For them to get the opportunities that, you know, they've never been afforded, and to do so well with it, and then also make a better life for themselves. Like, it just, if you can't get happy and get behind that, like, then I don't know how you operate as a person. I guess one thing that I did sort of want to get into is a large part of endurance sports, and, you know, whether it's running or cycling, can be the mental aspect as well, and sort of what you what you face and what you have to overcome in these long rides. What have you seen with them, in terms of in these sort of maybe longer races where, they don't have the racecraft, you could say, and you're having to basically coach them through that. What have you seen on that front?
Yeah, I mean, their mentality is absolutely phenomenal. Since day one, they just want to ride and ride and ride. And actually, prior to Zwift training, a good training day would be a 200k ride and basically hammer it as hard as possible. That would be it. So the principles of training to heart rate and power are very new to them. And actually, the beauty of those things is it shows us when riders might be starting to fatigue and get tired. And so I can kind of explain to them literally with science, I guess. You're tired, we need to give you a day off. And they don't really like resting. They want to, if they could, they would ride 5 races a day, 7 days a week, which knowing them, they'd probably still do really well in that. But obviously that is not the best way to become the best type of rider. I think the racing scene in Uganda is pretty low level. These boys enter a race, Kato and Waswa particularly, who are our top 2 talents. You expect them to win it, and that's what they've grown up on. So they basically think they can attack off the front and they'll win, which in Uganda works. But then when we start going to Kenya, where you've got a much more developed cycling infrastructure, all of a sudden you've got riders that are better than them. And as you say, the race isn't there. So actually Zwift is amazing because they're racing against some world-class riders, really top talents, sprinters. The boys are not built for sprinting. Their max sprints are pretty average, and they know that. So we have to be quite smart with how do we finish a race? How do we maybe attack in the last 10Ks? And actually our biggest win was Waswa in a racing league about a month and a half ago. And I looked at the average pace and I was looking at the boys' heart rates and thought, this is slow. And I know we're going into a final climb. And so Waswa is, I love him. We call him the smiling assassin. He'll be doing horrific numbers, numbers that I can only dream of, and I'd be passing out within about 2 minutes, and he'll have this beaming smile the whole time. And I absolutely just got so much time for the boy. And if I ask him to attack, he just wants to go. I don't know what he eats or what he does, but he's ready to go all the time. And so I said to him, like, Waswa, do you want to attack? Like, the pace is low. You could definitely get clear of this bunch on Zwift. And so he's like, yep. And next thing I know, he's 30 seconds up the road and one Dutch guy has gone with him in this breakaway on Zwift. And I'm looking at it thinking, right, this guy is a sprinter. Waswa, you're a climber. You've got a 5-minute climb, absolutely smoke him. And of course, Waswa being Waswa, just goes into it as hard as he can from the bottom of the climb, and he does completely smoke the guy, But obviously, if in a more acute race where you've got maybe another climber, you'd try and play a few games and things like that. Maybe a small attack at the start, whereas Waswa just hit the bottom of this climb, 400 watts, and just hung on for dear life. And that was our biggest race win, and it was just an amazing night. We'd been in this racing league, and I could tell a big race win was coming. They were doing well. They were getting in the right positions. It just we hadn't quite had the right luck at the right time. And then all of a sudden, we're in this position, 8K to go. Was was in the breakaway. There's no way the guys behind are catching. I'm feeling physically sick watching this all unfold. I think this is our moment, lads. We're going to finally get our big win. And it was just absolutely incredible. But as you say, the racecraft is something we don't get enough racing in terms of real road racing, outdoor racing in Uganda for many different reasons, including corruption, including just how dangerous the roads are here in the racing scene. Uganda's got an awful record in terms of road traffic kind of accidents and fatalities. And so again, an absolute another plus for Zwift. They can race competitive races. It feels like the real world. And we're starting to look at incorporating is these longer races on the weekend. They do 100k races, which the boys will still fly around in under 3 hours, but it gives them that opportunity to really work kind of the slow twitch muscle fibers and kind of work that more longer endurance stuff. So then we can kind of have a really wholesome training package for our guys. And also that'll be different racecraft, because most races are an hour long. You go hard at the start, it settles down, and then it comes into kind of a big bunch finish is 80% of racing on Zwift. Whereas these longer races, it'd probably be a bit more of a slow rollout. It'll be a bit more strategy and things. So we're going to start incorporating that literally from this weekend onwards. And that'll be really interesting to see how that plays out. And I think that might simulate more, if I can say it, real world racing scenarios, I think, for them in terms of tactics and using their heads a little bit more rather than just thinking we're the strongest boys and we'll ride off from kilometer one.
We're absolutely massive fans of every rider in the club, but probably our favorite is Richard. Now, this is someone who we're going to follow the progress of, and we're going to post regularly on our social media channels about him and the results that he gets. So talk about Richard and what you sort of think that he can achieve, because he's honestly so young and already has a number of top 10s in this, really impressive sort of class on Zwift. So talk about Richard and sort of, what's the limit for him?
Yeah, I mean, Richard is the younger brother of Kato and Waswa. So cycling is just in that family, it's in the DNA, and their dad is a very, very strong cyclist and one of the coaches at the club. But no, Richard is a fantastic guy, super quiet, very quiet. He can speak good English. He's just I guess, humble. I wouldn't say shy, just a humble, quiet character. He just gets on the bike and rides hard. I think he's about 53 kilos, so he's an absolute twig. So as soon as it goes uphill, he's fantastic. He's got the baseline power. His 20-minute efforts are there. The big challenge for us, particularly with the lighter riders, is those kind of smaller 5 to 1 minute efforts or sprint efforts. Anything 5 minutes sub is more of a muscular strength, and that is where we're kind of coming up with this concept where we train the riders' weaknesses over the next few months. So really, Richard will be put on a program that looks to improve his 5 to 1 minute and sprint power, basically, to really make him quite a wholesome, not just Zwifter, but rider. He can ride very well, very powerful rider. He's got a friend, Davis, who's also 17. I don't know if you guys know of him, but both of them are kind of going toe to toe through the system and kind of bringing the best out of each other, I would say. But Richard, it's very hard to say if 17-year-olds, where can they go? The mentality's there. If they can keep the enthusiasm and drive, it feels like the sky's the limit. I think they really have the numbers at such a young age. Richard has the numbers at such a young age to really go a long, long way. It's just managing that, I think, and nursing that. He likes to ride at a very low cadence, which for anyone who's had any knee injuries knows that that's a horrible thing to be doing. So there's a lot we need to work on in terms of the technique and improving certain aspects of his riding. But there's no doubting he's a fantastic rider, and I think we've got to just it'd be great to get him his first kind of podium or first race win in the next month or so. Would be, I think, give him that next kind of confidence lift and confidence boost. Kato and Waswa, we look at them and I'll look at a race and generally expect a top 10 from them, whereas Richard is a bit more on the inconsistent front. If he rides well, he will be up there with Kato and Waswa, but he could also have a shocker of a day and be 5-10 minutes down. And I think that's just part of his development at 17. What it's like, some days you just can't be bothered and it isn't there, and then other days you're on an absolute fire and you could smoke anyone, it seems. But yeah, I think really, again, trying to not be too over the top. It's very hard to say where it is, but it does feel like sky is the limit for these boys. But can we get them into a setup that allows them to race and make a living from that? Barring what we're doing through Zwift, there isn't anything else in the country that will help them. There's no help from our national federation through many different reasons and issues and challenges. It really is down to Masaka, the followers, to give this guy the best possible platform to showcase his talent. We give him the infrastructure. The talent is here and the infrastructure simply isn't. And so what me and Ross and the global cycling world are trying to do is we are literally giving these boys and girls the opportunity to showcase their talent through Zwift. And slowly but surely we are turning heads. We're getting messages from big teams saying, oh, we are aware of who Masaka is. We're aware of your riders. We know what you're doing. And that just helps kind of fuel the fire and get us going even more. And me and Ross kind of WhatsApping each other different screenshots of emails we've had from different teams, and it just kind of keeps you going and gets you going. But I think in the short term for Richard, we've got two big main goals for the lad. We've got this event called the Kintu Trial. It's a 500k 5-day. I wouldn't go as far as saying it's a race. It's meant to be more of it's like a friendly, almost like a pre-season game kind of sportif here in Uganda. And the organisers are a mountain bike tour company called Red Dirt. They've very generously given us 3 3 free spaces on this cycling event, and each space is about $1,000, you know. So it's a semi self-supported event where they'll be riding around some of the most beautiful kind of gravel and trail routes in Uganda. And it is kind of timed, and I'll be using it as a bit of a yardstick to see where Davis and Rich would ride together, and then Florence will be riding on her own. And it'll be really interesting to see how they hold up. We've just got back from a training camp, and we've been teaching them how to follow GPSs, because again, that's just something completely alien to them, you know, and things like that. And so yeah, it'll be very fascinating to see how they go, that'll be right at the end of November. I'm sure me and Ross will be posting loads of updates for people to kind of be following the race progress and things. But, you know, I look at the two boys and think if they get it together, they should be, you know, it's old white guys like myself trying to race them. You know, they should absolutely smoke everybody if it all comes together, they get it right. But it's going to be a big experience for them. They're 17. They've got to look after themselves for 5 days, and they'll only see me at the finish line. We're not going to be trailing them or anything like that. So punctures, problems on the bike, it's all down to them. So it'll be a really fascinating kind of, right, how do you look after yourselves in the good moments, and then also when things naturally do go wrong. So that's one of the big aims for Richard coming up. And then we've got the Zwift World Championships, the qualifiers in November. So we've got some preliminary qualifiers mid-November, and then unfortunately just after the Kintu Trail, like 3 or 4 days, we've got the main kind of African continental qualifier. Top 5 would then qualify for Zwift World Championships, which would be end of February next year. And I truly believe that we could get, if not a Ugandan and East African into the worlds. You know, I think our boys are some of the better Zwifters in Africa now for sure. It primarily depends on these more developed nations. You know, if South Africa go and throw in their very top riders, you know, from around the world, then we are in trouble. But, you know, the boys have got the racecraft and the experience to really show up on Zwift now. So I think whether it'll be Richard or whether it'll be Kato Wasa is hard to say, but if one of them get it right and have a good day, they could place top 5, and we could be seeing a Ugandan, a Masaka rider in the world next year, which would just be absolutely mind-blowing to even have that conversation, to think, you know, genuinely there's a chance that we have the talent here, you know. And what we can hope and pray is that a big team in Europe or Oz or US sees that and wants to take a punt on some Ugandan potential. And you know, that's what we're using Zwift for, is can we turn the heads of these big teams enough to make them think, yeah, it's worth the investment, the energy, the time, the educating that they're going to need to function in a different world for them. Can we turn those heads and make it happen? And I think Zwift is our perfect platform for that. So loads ahead for Richie, loads of good racing, you know, and some really good opportunities. So November is going to be a very busy month for me and for them, and yeah, can't wait for it.
Yeah, no, that's very exciting stuff, and we hope our man Richard has a big November, because yeah, it's one of the things that I'm extremely excited to follow the progress of not only everyone, but to be invested along a sort of a journey like this is something that sort of makes it so much more personal than, you know, just say donating a couple of dollars. So yeah, we love Richard, and we're looking forward to seeing him seeing him dominate in Africa. Absolutely. And hopefully the world one day. You touched on corruption in racing just a moment ago, and that's something I think I want to get into. Explain,
sure, when
you say corruption, what you mean by that, and sort of how much of an issue it is.
Yeah, I'm always try and use my words wisely, you know, not being from Uganda. I don't want to just come in and start pointing fingers, but in terms of the cycling world that we race in, you know, we have the Ugandan Cycling Association. That is our national federation that oversees officially the national riding. I mean, just to give you some examples of some of the challenges, and then I'll talk about the corruption. For the last 3 years, we haven't had a national championships. There should be, as a bare minimum, road championships, basically a road championships race, and maybe if we're lucky, a time trial race as well, like most nations would have in cycling. But really, we haven't had that for many different reasons. when there are races, there are so many different things that go on. It's almost hard to explain. We have these motorbikes called boda bodas, which go, they're like passenger motorbikes basically, and these guys are a little bit of a rule unto themselves. And what you'll often find is a rider from another team will pay a boda boda to draft behind for the race, which obviously is a huge unfair advantage. You know, you make your breakaway, you get away from the peloton, and then it's like you're still in a group because you've got 2 or 3 bodas to sit behind. At its worst, you see boda bodas actually trying to drive other cyclists off the road. They'll try and cut riders up because they know that they're a threat, and things like that. You know, Kato and Waswa, who are a bit more seasoned riders, have got hundreds of stories of corruption and cheating, and people even holding on to the back of motorbikes. In terms of the national, that's just our low key. That's like a local race, should we say, that the winner might make 20 quid from. And so I've kind of, for the guys that are under my like guidance on the more elite setup, I've basically banned racing in Uganda for them unless I approve of the race because of the danger to it, you know. And having to explain to these guys, like, you know, you can make a lovely living through Zwift racing now. Like, I know everyone wants to race outdoors. That is the gold standard. That is more fun. You know, I'm not aware of that, but you know, I talk about it with them and say we're going after the big fish now. We're not going after these small fish races, which are going to give you 10, 20 quid. And yeah, the money's helpful, but we know that there are other ways which we can make you a lot more money, should we say, primarily through doing well on Zwift and improving your rankings on Zwift. And so the more racing you do there, the better. But yeah, like, and then so that's just the local racing kind of scene that we have, you know, and these races are generally poorly advertised deliberately so that the club organizing the race means that it'll only be really their riders in it, and then they will win the money from the sponsors, you know. So they won't advertise very well. There's no like website that you can go to. There's no one-stop shop where you can kind of go, right, this is the racing calendar for the next 12 months. You know, a good example was just on Sunday, there was a race. We were away in Fort Portal on a training camp. We wouldn't have attended it anyway, but allegedly this race was for national selection. You know, if you place top 5, you'll be a part of the national team, whatever that means in the moment in Uganda, I don't know. You know, we didn't find out about that race till about 48 hours beforehand, you know, which, you know, for riders who we're trying to get into the shape of their life, 48 hours is useless for us. You know, that if we wanted to, you could just about scramble yourself to the start line, but you know, there's no taper, there's no getting ready for that event. Basically, it's like, right, whatever legs you've got, go with them, and that's all we can do. And there's a deliberate ploy from race organizers in Uganda to make it as hard as possible for outsiders to do well in their race, so that, you know, the national selection goes to the teams that want to. And then in the national setup itself, for example, that race, you know, was won by, I don't even know actually, another team, and they will officially be part of the national setup. But there is no real selection process. You know, it's maybe do well in one race, which is that's just such a poor way of doing it, you know. And I've offered to the National Cycling Federation, like, come use our machines and we can use science to select our best riders, or make that part of the process. You know, I can put them on a machine. We could do a 20-minute FTP test, and we could do a ramp test, and we can see, right, who are your best riders, who hit the best numbers. And then it's an unarguable system. It's an uncheatable system that way. They don't want to take me up on that because it's a bit too foolproof for them. You know, you can't really cheat Zwift, particularly if I'm watching them. You know, there's only so much that they can do. And they know if they do that, it'll end up being probably nearly all Masaka riders that will then take the national spots, because they are that good. I don't think it's arrogant or a mistruth to say that they generally are some of the top riders. And that's just extremely frustrating, you know. And then there's talk of the National Federation and these guys that did well in this race going to the Tour of Rwanda. But, you know, I could put my life savings on the Tour Uganda national team not being at the Tour of Rwanda for one reason or another. You know, there's always, it's so sad, and I hate talking about it so negatively, but there's always a good excuse, not even a good excuse, there's always an excuse from the upper level that the money didn't make it at the right time, or the bikes weren't given to us, or some sponsor fell through, or you know, it's like when you forget your homework at school, there's just always an excuse. And you just get to a point where you're like, come on, guys, this is just unacceptable. You know, these are guys' careers, you know, if you know, and I was trying to work on a deal with the Federation a little while ago whereby they allow me to enter international races under the banner of Uganda national team. And we were very close to signing it, but then I couldn't get the signature effectively, you know, and what they're looking for is, can I pay them off basically to get that signature, which I just will refuse to do at this point. And so we're looking at other options about presenting evidence to the National Council of Sport, which is like our bigger body for sport in Uganda, about presenting enough evidence of corruption and seeing, can we turn this around? But ultimately, it's a really sad situation because you've got, you know, my tagline is that the talent is here and the infrastructure isn't. You know, that is the thing that I kind of harp back to a lot when I share cycling in Uganda to anyone. And basically, we've got this talent, but we just have no system in country apart from really what Ross has come up with, and I've been lucky enough to be involved with to promote that talent. There is no real route or system out. There's no national selection criteria apart from one race which you get told about 2 days in advance. You know, it's just not there. It's just non-existent, and that is the hard part, because that's the bit that can get you down, where you're like, you know, if particularly Richard and Davis, who are 17 and hitting some phenomenal numbers, I look at that and think, gosh, if I had these boys in England, they would be under all sorts of guidance and setups and schemes and, you know, schooling, scholarships, and you name it, they'd be under it because they are that good. But because we're in the wrong country with corruption, it just isn't there at all. And that is the hard bit, where you're like, can we, how do we, you know, and that's something me and Ross have really got to work out, is how do we get these boys into more maybe international racing scene, to perform and to turn heads for bigger teams around the world. And you know, that's something we'll be looking at for many years, I think, until there is a change in the Ugandan Cycling Federation or the UCA out here, which is just what we're faced with, mate. And you know, we've got to just work around it as best we can. But it's a really sad situation, to say the least.
I mean, we could go on for minutes and, you know, about the hurdles and everything that these riders face. And, you know, most of them are around resources and equipment. But when you sort of have those hurdles that are not based around, you know, the fact that, you know, we can't get these bikes or we can't get bikes fixed or whatnot, and it's stuff that shouldn't be hurdles at all, it does, it makes me angry just hearing it there. And I can only imagine, you know, what it's like for you, obviously being there, and Ross as well, to sort of have all of these talented riders, and, you know, you can't access races, or you can't even do races safely, which is the most outrageous part of it all. And it's just, it is honestly, it is sad to see that, you know, sometimes the biggest hurdles that you anticipate, you know, maybe a country like Uganda having, is not actually what you think it would be.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think you're spot on there. Like, it's hurdles that shouldn't even be hurdles. You know, Ross has done for many years, way before I jumped on the scene with him, getting high quality bikes out here, high quality wheels. You know, now the clubhouse being done in Masaka. He's done an incredible job with equipping these riders with some top tier bikes. You know, there's S-Works bikes that I've seen people donated. There's a felt time trial bike, you know, stuff that I could only dream of buying myself, you know, and these guys have got the equipment. Is not an excuse. That's not a problem. And you're like, well, there shouldn't be any more problems then. With, you know, you think that you've ticked those boxes, and then turns out you get your boys in tip top shape and you put them on the start line, and it doesn't really matter because someone will cheat. You know, we've literally been in races just before going to Kenya with Kato and Waswa, and they said it was 6 laps of this 20k route, and basically they were like, they wanted to get Kato and Waswa to quit, to drop out the race, because they knew they were never going to beat them. So they just kept making Kato and Waswa ride this loop. So Kato and Waswa ended up doing 190k before they called the race off and just said, right, they're too strong, they've won. But basically they were like, let's just keep making them do laps until they blow. And I mean, I know these boys, they will ride 300-400k round in circles if you ask them to. So thankfully we were quite aware of the situation. We're like, well, this is never going to work. And Yeah, it's just absolute ridiculous things like that. As you say, the hurdles that they just shouldn't even be hurdles, they should be, in my head, it can't be that hard to organize, 4 or 5 competitive races a year that has some setup and some structure that then allows you to select your national team, not your favorites, but the actual guys that have worked hard and are there because they've worked and trained all year. You're not just picking your mates' teammates and things like that. And, all the corruption can quite often be intertwined. There's 3 or 4 big teams that are all, looking after each other or in bed together, whatever you want to call it. They're all kind of scratching each other's backs. And, we show up with this orange jersey and everyone knows that we don't really stand for that, and that's not, we don't accept that. And, you end up being a bit more targeted in races, for example, Kato and Wasso being sent off in misdirections or doing 190k ride instead of 120 and just things like that. But, we just keep going at the moment. And we've got one of the big exciting ones is we've got this big land project that I'm separate to Masaka. This is something slightly different that I'm working on, which we hope we can create a space for safe, corrupt-free racing and cycling in the future.
Let's stay on the development of cycling. Let's put the corruption and say the governing bodies aside. How do you think you can develop cycling as a sport? And then also, I guess, outside of being a sport as well, like how do you develop, cycling to make it a sort of a more of a popular thing, I guess, in Uganda? Because you've sort of mentioned it a bunch of times that it's one of the most beautiful parts of the world. It's one of the most beautiful places to ride. Like, how do you develop that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's one quick fix. I definitely don't have all the answers, but just from my personal observations, cycling is generally regarded by Ugandans as like a poor man's mode of transport. That's like if you had like a list of ways to travel, you've got walking and cycling are like that's the bottom run, and then you've got motorbike, car, having your own 4x4, whatever, and that's quite an important thing in the culture here. Like, everyone wants to be able to have their own personal means of transport, and changing that mindset to be like, actually, no, cycling is good for you. It's a great way to get around, a great way to see the world. Actually, if you do it right and you don't crash and you look after your body, it's actually a way to keep bills down and things like that. So a cultural mindset shift needs to occur and needs to take place. We're looking at a few kind of concepts. We've got some delivery companies out here, and I'm hopefully maybe next year going to have some conversations with them about, could we get some cyclists as couriers? At the moment they all go on motorbikes, but actually let's promote more environmentally friendly deliveries and things like that. And actually you get around the city as quick as any other way on a bicycle, particularly the fit lads, they absolutely hammer it around. And so showing people that that's another way to do business, to change their mindset again, that actually cycling can bring an income, that it isn't just an ends to a means and a poor way of getting around. That would be one way of doing it. And then cycle tourism, as you rightly mentioned, Uganda is, it's got everything, it's got safaris, it's got crater lakes, it's got volcanoes, it's got the gorillas. And you can see 90% of this stuff by bike. Our roads out of Kampala are absolutely stunning, really high quality tarmac roads, because they're all kind of the border roads, the connecting roads. They have to be looked after because that's how you get to Rwanda, to Congo, to Sudan, or whatever, South Sudan. So they're really well looked after, pretty quiet roads, really wide, like highways, so there's a nice bit of space for a bike, and then your truck that goes barreling past. And actually showcasing how beautiful the country is, showcasing that, again, an income can be made from cycling, that cycling tourism is growing in Uganda. It's definitely growing in Kenya with the migration gravel race and things like that. And Rwanda is light years ahead of Uganda, again, in terms of its cycling development and infrastructure. But actually breaking down those presuppositions that cycling can only be an ends to a means, that actually, literally, like when I was back in Bournemouth cycling to and from uni, it was an ends to a means, but actually it became a joy and a passion. And that's the mindset that we've got to shift, that it isn't just, it can be a great way to get around, but it can be so much more than that. And, how we do that is, as you say, through tourism, it's through just showcasing talent. I think if we can get a rider into the world stage, either one of ours or some of the other riders, like to create a hero for a nation. They've done it very well in running. Everyone knows that Uganda's got some of the best runners in the world, and people will know who won the 2012 marathon and things like that, and who Joshua Cheptegei is and stuff like that. But they won't have a clue who the best national cyclist is, because there's no publicity, there's no media for it. And if we can create someone that people look up to and go, flip, wow, Kato, Waswa, Richard, Davis, they're making it, they're having a lovely life, a comfortable life, they're making money. How did they do that? Well, it's through cycling. Then you're going to start changing people's mindsets again, and they've got heroes to look at and inspirational people to look up to. So there's a number of different facets and ways in which you can answer that question. I don't think there's one particularly right way, but there'd be kind of the 2 or 3 ways that I would really target developing cycling and growing cycling, and bikes are here. That's, people assume that there isn't bikes here. There are hundreds and thousands of, they're not great, crappy Chinese ones, but they are here nonetheless. Bikes are accessible. The top end carbon stuff, admittedly, that's harder to get, as most people would expect, but you can pick a bike up for £50 in Uganda, which is still a lot of money for Ugandans, but for most Ugandans, that is something that could be saved up for and purchased in a year's time. Most people could afford to do that, despite the level of poverty here. So yeah, it's definitely something. I feel it's like a little volcano that's ready to erupt, cycling in Uganda. I think once the pandemic's a little bit more kind of calmed down, we can get it right with tourism and we can get it right with our riders. It just feels like we're on the edge of something very, very exciting. What exactly that will be and what that will look like, God only knows. But the talent is here. The opportunities are not necessarily here. The tourism the potential is here. Is, can we tap into that in terms of the riders and also from a tourism perspective and I guess an infrastructure perspective as well?
Yeah, I think there's an old saying in like professional sport is just basically when talent meets opportunity. And obviously the talent is there and the opportunities have been something that has never existed before in Uganda. And while the work that, you and Ross are doing is ultimately giving them that opportunity, there's still, as we've sort of discussed, a large number of barriers. And a lot of that is got to do with the pandemic. And I think that's affected so many things. It's not funny, but it's close. Yeah. I can tell by the conversations with you and Ross that, it is close. And it will be exciting to see sort of, where this goes in the next, 6 to 18 months to see the success that the club and the riders keep on going. So it's keep fighting the good fight.
Thank you, mate. It will do.
So I know that outside of the cycling club that, you're working on some projects and stuff, and you sort of just mentioned one just a couple of minutes ago. Get into sort of everything that you're working on right now and sort of working towards for the next however long you see yourself being in Uganda for.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the biggest one is this land project. We've when we were back in the UK with not with COVID, when COVID hit, and we were stuck there. I was really thinking like, what is the answer to all these things that we've been discussing for the last hour or so? And one of the things that really struck me was how can we make the sport of cycling more accessible? And I was staying at my wife's parents in a beautiful part of the UK, like completely opposite side of the country from my folks. So we're right over in the western side near the Wales-England border. And it's renowned for being a really amazing mountain bike scene. I'm in no way a mountain biker, because there's just not enough numbers for me to analyze and nerd out over. But I'd really enjoyed the different disciplines, should we say. And I thought, I'm riding all these like local trails through the woods with little jumps and banked corners and whatever else. And I was just like, this can't be that hard to replicate in Uganda if I can get some land. And as not luck would have it, I ended up in a meeting with a very, very wealthy, amazing Ugandan who we're now working with. And I was just sharing with him what I'm doing with cycling and what I want to do, and what I want to facilitate. And he was like, Sam, I have 100 acres of land near Entebbe, which is our main airport. So it's about 45 Ks from Kampala and about 80 K from Masaka. So really fantastic location. He's like, I've got 100 acres that I don't really know what to do where they own it. I don't want to sell it because it's going up in value at a really good rate. But if I just leave it, people will move in on it and squat on it. And then I've got all sorts of legal wrangles. So I need someone to like use this land. Do you want it? I was like, yeah, absolutely. I would love it. I'll rip your arm off for it. But like, how much are you going to charge me? He's like, you can. And he was like, no, it's for free. Like, so we got some lawyers involved. We wrote up this contract. So I've got an initial 10-year lease on this land, which we signed in May this year. And what has happened since signing this land has been nothing short of incredible. You know, nothing is built yet on this land, but what is coming is super exciting. So we've been in conversation with an organization called Pump for Peace, who are backed by Red Bull and Velo Solutions. And they're going to come out hopefully next year and build Uganda an asphalt pump track, basically. And these guys are the owners of Pump Track World Championships. And we will be able to host, because the track will be built to such a high quality spec. You know, it's about 80,000 euros it will be cost, and these guys will do it for free in Uganda, because we fit their kind of charitable model and development model. So they're going to come out, build us this track. Hopefully, I'm pushing for June next year, and effectively build us this high quality track. But it means, as I say, because it's built to this really high spec, we will be allowed to host international races on it, and actually World Cup qualifiers for the first time ever we will be able to host. And we don't really need the blessing of our national federation. It's kind of independent to that, because these guys are the founders of it. They kind of write the rules as they go, and understand that in certain developing countries, there are hurdles, as we say, that shouldn't be there in terms of corruption and things. And so potentially as early as next year, 2022, we could be hosting a East Africa kind of competition for pump track racing, which is, for those of you who are not familiar with pump track racing, it's basically BMX racing, but like a time trial rather than 5 go off at the start. It looks very similar to BMX racing. You'd just be like, oh, it's the same. It is very similar with slightly different nuances. But what will happen is the top 4 men and top 4 women from that event will qualify for Pump Track World Championships, which will probably be in Europe or America next year. So in terms of then starting to create opportunities, you're like, well, that is colossal. You know, we're looking at international races to go to international events. So we've got the pump track coming, and then we're going to build like a network and infrastructure of trails, you know, basic trails, kind of nothing super technical to start with, simply because it's not my background in terms of building trails. I don't know what I'm doing, so it'll be very much learn as we go along. But we're going to have like a perimeter, like dirt road, and the perimeter of the land, to give people a size of it, is about 3 kilometers. So our boundary is 3K. So we'll have like a dirt road that goes all the way around that people can ride on, and then a nice network of trails inside, and a pump track. And we're in conversations with a big sponsor as well for next year. They're talking of giving us, hopefully, this is not Masaka, this is separate, just to be clear, like giving us about $150,000 to build a velodrome, you know, a proper outdoor velodrome, which we could then host huge races on. Again, super pioneering for not only Uganda but East Africa. You know, there's nothing like that in East Africa in terms of a velodrome, a pump track. And basically we want to create this bike kingdom that can host really high level races that sponsors around the world would be proud to put money into, and then therefore I can put money into the prize money, you know. And so say, right, instead of winning 20 quid, it's 500 quid to win the racing series. And then all of a sudden you've created something that people want to be a part of, because there is good money that people can make a living off, you know. And so that is the vision for this land project. So we're going to call it the Kasanji Sports Park, and it's super early days. You won't find anything online about it yet, but it's something that a lot of big conversations are happening kind of behind the scenes. And what we hope one day is it will become like a national center for excellence, whether we do that with the federation or separate. You know, my dream is to have the Catos, the Waswas, the Davises, the Florences, Richard be able to live on that accommodation for free under the scholarship of Masaka. They work a little bit on the land to help kind of keep all the trails and things maintained, but then have 24 access to high quality equipment and training, you know, and coaching and like that. And so they can live, eat, sleep, breathe cycling with their families being there as well. So that is the bigger vision, you know, and we hope to have a campsite there and maybe some luxury cabins later down the line. So it's just very early days. architects have got some initial designs and plans for us. And yeah, it's hugely exciting, because I think, you know, as I was describing earlier, it feels like this little volcano is simmering, and you feel this could be quite a big pressure release. If we get it right in the next kind of 12 months, it could be absolutely colossal for not just cycling in Uganda, as I say, but I think in terms of East African cycling. I'm already getting messages from Kenya and Rwanda saying, right, Sam, what's the latest on this land? We're hearing rumors of this and this, and, you know, kind of managing those expectations. And for it to be in Uganda, and the primary focus and the primary attention will be given to our Masaka riders as a first and foremost, you know, it could be hugely formative in that development and that growth of the sport around Uganda, at least.
That is absolutely sensational stuff, man. I tell you what, when you get the velodrome set up, I will bring my crappy bike over and I will absolutely come last in a 10K time trial in it, because that sounds, mate, that sounds amazing. I absolutely love all of that. And it is great to see that not only talented athletes get the opportunity, but some of the most beautiful people in the world who for years and years and decades have got very little, and their attitudes when they, you know, get even the smallest thing to you and me is simply amazing. So thank you very much for the work you do and for coming on for a chat, mate. That was a lot of fun, and it was you're very insightful learning more about you and about the cycling world in Uganda.
No, thank you so much, Chris. Really enjoyed it, and just so grateful to have the opportunity and platform to share about Masaka and just this country out here, man.